You turd? NSA King Turd, General Keith Alexander wants the government to centralize the internet. Translation: we want to keep and control all of the information that's on the internet. Well, change the channel if you have nothing to hide. Blah, 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 blah. Stop making excuses up for these geezers. Little bit by little bit by little bit, they squirm their way into knowing every single aspect of our private lives. And they want to know more. It never ends, people. There will not be a day when the rights are given back to us by these turds. They want to control everything, and it's hard with 7 billion heads on this planet. This is why they do the old turn the heat up gradually on the frog technique. Children will come up in a world where all these new things are already in place to the degree that it's normality. They will never know a world without the Patriot Act, National Defense Authorization Act, President being able to assassinate people, people being able to be killed under suspicion alone, free speech zone, grandma and grandpa's getting shaken down for explosives, and all the newfangled things that they can come up with along the way. This is what they do. This is what they've always done, in case you didn't know.
In November of 2004, the US led an assault on Fallujah, a stronghold of opposition against the US occupation west of Baghdad. Intense bombardment left many of its buildings destroyed and displaced much of the city's 300,000 population. Eventually, the US was forced to admit that amongst its arsenal was white phosphorus, a substance the Pentagon described as a chemical weapon when it was used by Saddam Hussein against the Kurds. In addition, eyewitnesses claimed the US military used, quote, unusual weapons. Subsequent investigations have focused on the possible use of depleted uranium by the US for its armor-piercing qualities. The US, however, denies DU weaponry was employed. Research has shown elevated levels of radioactivity in Fallujah and across Iraq. Iraqi physicians have also long reported a spike of cases involving severe birth defects in Fallujah since 2004, which are shocking in their severity. Doctors report children born with multiple heads, others paralyzed, seriously brain damaged, missing limbs, or with extra fingers and toes. Many researchers say uranium from the shelling may be to blame. However, no conclusive proof of the link has been established.
Personally, I was a radio operator for 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, one of the 5 battalions that laid siege to the city. The story that my command told us was that the city had been taken over by terrorists. They were in some way or another holding the civilians of that city hostage, and we were going to liberate the civilians of Fallujah by telling them to leave, coming in, and sweeping the entire city, killing anyone who decided to pick up arms against us.
Was it necessary for someone to have picked up arms, or was anyone in the city thought to be fair game by that point because an evacuation order had been issued?
Well, the technical rules of engagement said that someone actually had to have a weapon in their hands to be considered a combatant. However, the way that we conducted ourselves in the siege was in many cases indiscriminate. And what I mean is the tactics that we used, the weapons that we used were indiscriminate. Also, all military-age males were forced to stay within the city, whether there was any evidence that they were resistance fighters or not. So,
well, that's sort of the current rules of engagement in Afghanistan and elsewhere under the Obama administration, isn't it? That those fighting aged males are considered an enemy combatant unless subsequently proven after their death not to be. Do we know how many people were killed, actually?
No one knows. I mean, there are some graveyards that were digged in the city that had thousands of people who were killed, but there are no accurate body counts.
But certainly hailed as a great success in the US counter-insurgency strategy.
I mean, in the US, not in Iraq.
It was the second study, then, by Busby, which analyzed the hair of parents of malformed children in 2011. It was also actually co-authored by Samira Alani, who we saw in Sebastian's Fault Lines film there just a moment ago. Here's the conclusion, or part of the conclusion of that report. Whilst caution must be exercised about ruling out other possibilities, because none of the elements found in excess are reported to cause congenital diseases and cancer except uranium, these findings suggest the enriched uranium exposure is either a primary cause or related to the cause of the congenital anomaly and cancer increases. Questions are thus raised about the characteristics and composition of weapons now being deployed in modern battlefields. Di Williams, what's interesting there is much of the focus in the past about controversial unconventional weaponry or unconventional usage of weaponry like phosphorus has focused on phosphorus or depleted uranium. But there, it seems, what they found in the hair of parents wasn't depleted uranium, but uranium.
Yeah. As far as depleted uranium weapons were what I call second generation uranium weapons. If you think of nuclear as first generation, in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, a lot of use was done to develop depleted uranium ammunition, specifically mainly for anti-tank systems. However, since Gulf War I, there's another generation of weapons which have been developed which need the same qualities which uranium has, ranging from very small shaped charge weapons up to very large bunker buster warheads. And there's something like about 24 different weapon systems which in various ways use either high density ballast or high density shaped charge liners. People like Ross in the military will know what I'm talking about here. Where this is relevant when you get to Fallujah is if you go through the inventory of weapons which were used. A very old anti-tank weapon is something called TOW, T-O-W, which flies low over a tank and it fires two shaped charges into the top of the tank and destroys it. Now this was designed back in the 70s or 80s. It's not a new weapon. But I was told in 2001 by an industry specialist that where this was officially using copper-shaped charge liners, the industry was now using copper and uranium interchangeably because uranium is 10 times more powerful than copper for the same effect. These things are effectively the original version of what you know as IEDs these days.
But does that mean, though, when a US spokesman tells us quite confidently we did not use depleted uranium in Fallujah, that they might be telling the truth because they're actually simply using uranium?
Yes.
The death toll from an outbreak of Ebola in western Uganda has risen to at least 16. There are fears that it will spread to the capital, Kampala, and the president has issued a national warning. And there's no vaccine or treatment for the disease. 2 car bombs in Iraq's capital have killed at least 19 people. The blast happened in a mainly Shia Muslim neighborhood in central Baghdad. At least 47 other people have been injured. Last week, a group linked to Al-Qaeda called on its followers to intensify a campaign to reclaim land. The US has announced new sanctions targeting Iran's oil industry and banks in China and Iraq that do business with the country. Iran's under suspicion over its nuclear program. Tehran maintains its nuclear ambitions are for peaceful purposes.
Vicious, heartless, selfish, feckless fools. You who would have voluntarily surrendered your humanity to an organized gang of satanic psychopaths. Was it for gain? Was it the bad end of a compromise gone wrong? Was it out of fear after having come into a position of losing the position, and then you assume the position? Were you up for it anyway? You who bring the unwilling world to the doorstep of global war. You who are arranging the tableau like a dinner table for the damned ferrying ships bound for salvage, to be evidence in yet another false flag, waving blood red above the burning bodies of the duped and deluded who went into combat for the bankers. The pens move and the weapons fire. Iran has done nothing to you. Their restraint has been admirable. In the mountains, ordinary human beings are skiing. They are walking through the pistachio orchards. They're dreaming their individual dreams within the parameters of the collective dream. They are people like you and I. They have children, families and friends. They are not making war. We are. The most powerful agency for calculated death and destruction is the fundamentalist Christian right. Their sanctimonious demagogic preachers whip them into a lather of self-righteous hate, manipulated and inspired by the very ones who committed the crimes that others are blamed for. These millions of deceived lemmings march off the metaphorical cliffs of their own ignorance, titanic edifices of Tamasic stone. They kneel before their crucified God, and then proceed to crucify entire nations for the crime of being different. They are the ones who make it all possible, who cannot comprehend the meaning of the words they read from the book they claim to be infallible. Like rats in a maze, searching for the cheese which bears no resemblance to the genuine article, there is no maze. These are the same people who would crucify the man again if he showed up today. These are the people from Big Hair Country. They came here to be led astray while being informed that they should not be led astray. There's nothing quite like the righteous Fundi. There's no limit to the possibilities of dissociated and dissonant cogitation. There he stands on the doorstep, pointing towards the highway for the young girl with the child in her arms. There he stands, expounding on the welfare families and needy people who ought to go out and get a job just like the one he has. It's obvious they're in that situation because they don't love Jesus. They love Jesus, though, and Jesus loves them, even if he does have to sleep in the basement or out in the garage.